Hello, dear listeners. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for your patience and your unwavering support while I awaited the arrival of some essential hardware. Today, I'm ready to share something truly special. For the first time, I present a chapter narrated in my own voice. But before we dive into the adventure, I have a small request. Imagine that the like button is a shutter on a vintage camera. Its lens is focused on something extraordinary. Now click that like button as if you're trying to capture a sighting of Bigfoot standing right in front of you. And if you haven't already, consider hitting the subscribe button. By doing so, you become an essential part of this creative journey, allowing me to continue weaving captivating stories for your enjoyment. So, without further ado, let's embark on this thrilling narrative together. Remember, every click and every subscription fuels my passion, and I can't wait to share more epic tales of the unknown with you all. Thank you for being here. Stay curious, stay enchanted, and keep squatching. Chapter 16: The Calm Before. As the morning sun bathed their campsite in a warm glow, Dale, Sophie, and Dr. Anderson sat around the remnants of their campfire, savoring the tranquility that surrounded them. The cool, fresh mountain air still chilled from the night. They carefully stoked the coals, then set about preparing their breakfast and brewing a pot of coffee. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the crisp mountain air, awakening their senses and filling them with a renewed sense of energy for the day ahead. With the tantalizing scent of breakfast cooking over the campfire, they shared stories and laughter, savoring the simple joy of a morning in the wilderness. As they enjoyed their meal and fueled up for the day, they discussed their plans to head back to the SUV to restock on supplies before venturing to the caves. The past few days had been relatively calm, with no signs of the mysterious howls or thumps that had haunted their first night. "So, what's the plan for today?" Stephen asked. Dale stretched his limbs, his gaze wandering towards the dense forest that surrounded them. "I think we should head back to the SUV and pick up some more supplies," he suggested, his voice carrying a note of anticipation. "We could use some extra food and some new batteries before we head to the caves tomorrow." The batteries had drained much faster than expected, leaving their devices powerless. Dale remarked, a note of frustration creeping into his voice. "This shouldn't be happening." Dale exchanged a glance with Sophie and Dr. Anderson, who both had checked the trail cams with the same results. It seemed that their electronic equipment had been affected by the same mysterious drain on their power supply. Sophie nodded in agreement, her brow furrowed in concern. "It's strange. The batteries were fully charged before we left, and now they're practically dead." Dr. Anderson chimed in, his voice tinged with curiosity. "It's almost as if something is draining the energy from our devices. We'll have to keep an eye on this." "Did we ever find that missing trail cam?" Dale then asked. Sophie shook her head, a frown marring her features. "No. Other than a piece of the strap that held it to the tree, we haven't found anything. It's like it just vanished into thin air." Stephen nodded in agreement, his gaze scanning the surrounding trees as if searching for a sign of the missing device. "Yeah, it's strange. We searched the area thoroughly, but there was no sign of it anywhere." Dr. Anderson furrowed his brow in thought, a hint of concern flicking in his eyes. "I wonder if it could have been taken by an animal or something." Sophie shrugged, her expression uncertain. "It's possible, but usually animals don't mess with equipment like that. And even if they did, we should have been able to find some traces of it nearby." Dale nodded in agreement, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Let's keep an eye out for any other strange occurrences." With their equipment issues noted, Dale glanced at Sophie and Dr. Anderson, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "All right, so who's going to stay back at camp while the other two go get supplies?" Dale asked, his voice holding back a hint of uncertainty. Dr. Anderson glanced around the clearing, his gaze settling on the camp they had set up. "I don't mind staying back," he offered, a reassuring smile on his face. "I could use some time to organize our gear and maybe do a little exploring around the area." Sophie nodded in agreement, a sense of relief washing over her. "That sounds like a good idea," she replied, her voice filled with gratitude. "We shouldn't leave camp unattended, especially with everything that's been happening lately." Dale flashed Dr. Anderson a grateful smile. his shoulders relaxing slightly at the prospect of leaving someone behind to keep watch over their campsite. "Thanks, Stephen. We'll head out as soon as we can and be back before you know it." "Dale," Dr. Anderson responded with a chuckle. "I promise I won't wander too far. I'll stay close to camp and focus on organizing our gear." Dale nodded, though a hint of seriousness lingered in his expression. "I know you're excited about exploring, but let's not forget the stories we've heard about people disappearing in these mountains. I don't want you to become another one of those mysterious cases that UFO enthusiasts and Bigfoot hunters speculate about." Dr. Anderson's smile faltered for a moment as he glanced around the dense forest surrounding the camp. "You're right, Dale," he admitted, his tone somber. "I'll stick close to camp and keep an eye out for anything unusual. Safety first." With a reassuring pat on the shoulder, Dale nodded in approval. "Thanks, Stephen. We'll be back before you know it. Just keep an eye out for anything strange, and stay safe out there." Sophie zipped up her backpack, adjusting the straps as she glanced over at Stephen. "All right, Stephen," she began, her voice serious. "It should be about 7 hours round trip to the SUV and back. Keep the GPS unit on you at all times, and if anything happens, hit the SOS button immediately. It's set to send an alert to the local sheriff's office." Dr. Anderson nodded, double-checking the GPS unit attached to his belt. "Got it," he replied, his tone serious. "We'll be back before you know it. Just keep an eye out, and don't hesitate to call for help if anything seems off." Sophie replied, once again, worried about leaving their companion. With a final glance back at their campsite, Dale and Sophie set off down the trail, their footsteps echoing through the quiet forest as they disappeared from view. As they hiked down the trail, Dale and Sophie chatted about the sights and sounds of the forest, pointing out interesting landmarks and wildlife they spotted along the way. The sun filtered through the dense canopy above, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor as they made their way back to the SUV. After about 3.5 hours of uneventful hiking, they finally arrived at the SUV, the familiar sight of their vehicle a welcome sight after their journey through the wilderness. With a sense of accomplishment, they unloaded their backpacks and began to gather the supplies they needed for the return to camp. As they took a short break and prepared to leave, a sudden commotion broke the serene silence of the forest. It sounded as if a rock or some other projectile had been lobbed through the forest and landed nearby on the forest floor. Dale and Sophie exchanged glances, their hearts racing with anticipation as they scanned the surrounding trees. After a tense moment, they relaxed slightly, chalking it up to antics of the local wildlife. "Must have been a squirrel," Dale remarked, his voice filled with amusement. "Probably just throwing pine cones or something." Sophie nodded in agreement, her nerves still on edge from the unexpected disturbance. "Yeah, you're probably right. Let's just grab what we need and get back to camp," she suggested, eager to put some distance between them and whatever had caused the disturbance. As they continued down the trail for a few hours, the familiar sight of the broken trees marked their previous stopping point. Dale and Sophie decided to have a snack and enjoy a brief respite from their hike. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the forest as a rock crashed through the branches, landing just a few feet from where they sat, leaving no doubt as to what the object was. Dale and Sophie exchanged wide-eyed glances, their hearts pounding in their chest as they tried to discover the being responsible for lobbing such a projectile. "What was that?" Sophie whispered. Dale shook his head. "A rock, but I'm not sure what threw it," he admitted, his voice filled with apprehension. "But whatever it was, it came from up there," he added, gesturing towards the dense canopy above. Sophie swallowed nervously, her gaze darting between the surrounding trees. "Do you think it was just another squirrel or something else?" she asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Dale shrugged, his eyes narrowed as he scanned the foliage above. "It's hard to say. Let's keep an eye out and stay alert as we continue. But I really don't think it was a squirrel this time," he suggested, his tone laced with caution. With worrying glances over their shoulders, Dale and Sophie gathered their belongings and resumed their hike, the unsettling sound of the rock crashing through the branches lingering in their minds as they hastened their pace back to the camp. As Dale and Sophie returned to camp, a sense of relief washed over them as they found Dr. Anderson cooking supper over the campfire. The aroma of sizzling food greeted them, dispelling some of the tension that had lingered since their unsettling encounter on the trail. Dr. Anderson chuckled as Dale and Sophie approached the campfire. Well, look who's back early," he remarked with a grin. I didn't expect you for at least another 40 minutes. What was the rush? Could you smell my wonderful cooking? Dale exchanged a playful glance with Sophie before replying. Oh, we just missed your wonderful company. Plus, we had some extra motivation to pick up the pace. Sophie chimed in with a mischievous twinkle in her eyes. Yep, those fierce squirrels chasing us definitely provided some extra incentive to pick up the pace. Dr. Anderson laughed heartily, shaking his head in disbelief. Ah yes, the legendary vicious squirrels of the Sierra Nevadas. Who knew they were such effective motivators for hikers? They all laughed at this. As they settled in around the campfire, the two told the story of their newest adventure. Dale and Sophie recounted the hike back to the SUV, sharing the strange occurrences of the rock crashing through the branches. Dr. Anderson listened intently, his expression thoughtful, as he stirred the contents of the pot simmering over the flames. That's quite peculiar, Dr. Anderson remarked in contemplation. Bigfoot is known to exhibit such behavior in the forest, particularly when they feel threatened or want to assert their territory. Dale nodded in agreement, recalling stories he had read of Bigfoot throwing rocks at people in the wilderness. Yeah, it's definitely something to keep in mind as we continue our expedition, he acknowledged, his gaze drifting towards the surrounding trees. Sophie shivered slightly, the memory of the rock crashing through the branches still fresh in her mind. Dr. Anderson offered a reassuring smile, his eyes reflecting the flickering flames of the campfire. We must remain vigilant and respect the wildlife around us, he reminded them, his tone gentle but firm. But let's not let it dampen our spirits. We're here to find Oma and uncover the mysteries of what is going on after all. With renewed determination, the trio continued their meal, their conversation turning to the plans for the following day's expedition to the caves. Despite the unsettling encounter with the rock, they remained steadfast in their pursuit of meeting with Sasquatch, eager to uncover the secrets hidden within the depths of the forest.